Hello, you're watching the Great Canadian Bagel, and today we have another Canadian federal election forecast for you. Now, before we begin the rest of the video, I would just once again like to shout out all of my channel members. I greatly appreciate your contributions to the channel, and you help fund all of this stuff and give me a lot more reliable income to plan around. So thank you all, and if you want to help the channel, by all means, join below. If you can't afford to join below, by all means, just like, share, subscribe, and comment. Those generic, normal YouTube things matter quite a bit. So do those, please. Now, let's get to the rest of the video. So this is the first time that using my model the way I want to use it, we have a conservative majority. Now, I have posted forecasts previously that have conservative majorities, but I did some tinkering with them just for interest's sake. But this, I mostly tinkered with the recency bias, cranking it up. Here I have the recency bias where I would normally want it to be, and we still have a conservative majority. Which means, because if you crank up the recency bias, that means the more recent polls are weighted more. Which then tells us that with lower recency bias, which I think it should be between elections, which is why I like doing it this way, there is a lot of room for the conservative majority to grow. In fact, about 30 odd seats. There's a lot of room to grow. Now, will they grow that far? I don't know. And I can't really guarantee that or tell you that. I can tell you right now, it's trending that direction. They're trending to about a 10 to 12 point lead. But will they get there? Who's to say? Everything can change. Nothing is necessarily stable in polling. But what I can tell you is right now the Conservatives do have a 9-point lead. And that lead is growing. And with that 9-point lead, they have a majority. A very stable majority. Now, what's interesting about this majority is, if you remember back months and months ago, back all the way to March or earlier, there was a lot of speculation in the beginning of 2023 that the Conservatives could not win a majority without doing really good in the GTA, without a total breakthrough. And here, yes, they have gained seats in the GTA, don't get me wrong. They're up, just doing quick math, 11 seats in the GTA if we want to include Oakville-Burlington. If we want to take Oakville-Burlington out, they're up 8 seats in the GTA. So this is not to say they haven't gained ground in the GTA, but as this model shows, they don't actually need those seats for majority. Now, they want those seats because the more seats you have, the better. The more stable the majority is, the more you can do, the more influence you have, the less likely you're going to get shenanigans like what's happening in the U.S. Congress with the Republicans interfighting among themselves. But what we can see here, though, is quite clearly, if we want to just magic away these 11 seats in Oakville, Burlington, and the GTA, how do the Conservatives get a majority? And again, it's pretty simple. Vancouver Quandra, North Vancouver Burnaby, Thunder Bay, Superior North, words are hard, St. Boniface St. Vital, Winnipeg South, London North Centre, Hamilton Mountain. And what's that give us? That's already 7 seats. That's a majority. Slim majority, but it's a majority. We could throw in Egmont too, or Cardigan as well, or Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake, or Kings Hants, or Winnipeg South Centre, or Vancouver North. If we wanted to, throw those in, and now we are back to something like 178, 180. There's a lot of room to play here. contrary to what a lot of people were speculating. Now, why is that? Why is the Conservatives right now looking like they can win a majority without winning many seats in the GTA? Because remember, if we go back to 2011, the Conservatives needed to win a lot of seats in the GTA to win their majority. If Stephen Harper didn't do really well in Brampton and Mississauga, he would not have won that he would not have won a majority in that election. In fact, it's not entirely implausible that with worse performance in the GTA, maybe there could have been a Liberal NDP coalition, depending on how many seats you want to flip. And we might have seen the first NDP federal government. So what's different about today that wasn't the case 12 years ago? Why are the Conservatives now so much more capable of winning majority without winning the GTA? Now, the first thought process might be, oh, they're doing better in small city Ontario. In a little bit. A little bit. They're doing a bit better in Essex, a bit better in Niagara, definitely better in Hamilton. But they're not doing better in Kitchener. In Kitchener in 2011, they won what would be the Waterloo riding today. So they're not winning that now. So it's not really that. You can't really say it's Atlantic Canada per se. Yes, they're doing a lot better in Newfoundland, but they're doing par in PEI, a little worse in New Brunswick, but a little better in Nova Scotia. So it's kind of a wash. So it's Newfoundland a bit, they're doing better in, 4 seats better, sorry. But 4 seats isn't majority make. Where this is coming from, where the Conservatives' capacity to win a majority today that might not rely on winning the GTA or winning fewer seats in the GTA or fewer percentage of seats in the GTA than they did in 2011 is principally the result of political realignment. The coalitions of today are very different to the coalitions of 2011. The parties are different. Jack Layton's NDP is was much more socially centrist and even economically centrist. It was more of a classical old school Labour Party than a progressive left-wing party that we see today under Singh. The Liberals are also a different party today. Now, arguably they are a more effective party today than they were under Michael Ignatieff, but Michael Ignatieff was running a centrist Liberal party. Some have even argued it might be center-right economically. I think that's a bit absurd, because I don't think they're competing in the same lane as Harper. And Harper definitely was not right-wing economically. He was just center-right. But that's a stark difference, even if we just call Ignatieff a true center, to Trudeau. Trudeau was clearly center-left on all issues. He might even be considered left-wing on some issues. Okay. So the Liberals and the NDP have moved to the left. Okay. What about the Greens? Well, they've also moved to the left, principally on social issues. Economics, they're probably in a similar position they were back in 2011, but social issues, they've moved significantly to the left, because in 2011, the Greens really didn't run on any social issues at all. But now they've moved to the left, and they're clearly campaigning and championing a lot of left-wing social issues. So if all the three main left-wing parties have moved to the left on every single, or on most issues, what has this resulted in? Well, this is a symptom and a result of general realignment. Now, why do politics realign? That's a very interesting question in and of itself. Because on the surface, it doesn't make any sense. Why should political spectrums really change? Policies don't change. What makes the standard consideration of what is right-wing and left-wing don't meaningfully change. No one would argue, say, capitalism is now left-wing position, or free trade is now a left-wing position. That's not a thing. Usually considering those are center-right or right-wing positions. That's why right liberals are right liberals and not just liberals. So why do we see political realignments? And why is it happening seemingly all across the West at the exact same time? That seems a bit odd. Does it not? Why should it be like that? Well, the reason why we are seeing basically every single Western country go through the exact same realignment and seeing the exact same factions forming, the left becoming more left-wing on all issues, and the right becoming more socially conservative, not leaps and bounds, but slightly, slowly, more socially conservative, but possibly more economically moderate. Though, again, when I say moderate in this regard, I do not mean that they have a middle economic policy. I mean, they have some left-wing and some right-wing policies. If we look at Pierre Poilievre right now, he's talking about things like funding interventionist drug rehab, or incentivizing using federal funding to incentivize cities to build more build more houses. That's not traditionally a right-wing idea. Either of those things. Those are traditionally more left-wing or left-leaning ideas. But someone like Pierre Poilievre is championing. Those are two of his core things in his campaign. This isn't a surprise once you consider why these changes happen. So why do this happen? Well, at its most basic level, we see political change like this. We see parties and political alignments shift in response to generation turnover. The world circumstances that a generation grows up in, the world events that happen during their life, color their views for the rest of their life. That's one of the reasons why generations exist. They're not a cute naming convention that we put to birth years for fun of it. They are birth years that are similar because everyone in these birth years experienced these events that shaped them in their adolescence and their childhood. What we're seeing right now, depending on how you want to define generations, but most definitions of generations, we're going to use the standard one, for example, for Generation Z, which is 1997 to 2012, I think that's not a very good definition, but we're just going to use that here for now. This generation is now actually starting to exercise political power. They're starting to take political influence by voting, by making videos online, by campaigning, by volunteering, etc. Now, on the flip side, the silent generation, who are usually considered like 29 to 43-ish, they are dying because they're old. Tragically, it's just what it is. So they're voting less, they're making less percentage of the electorate, they're campaigning less, they're volunteering less, they're fundraising less, etc. This is the most basic thing that propels ideological change, which propels political spectrum change. So why does this cause left-wing parties to become seemingly more left-wing? Well, fundamentally, this is a bit of a chicken and egg question, but generally speaking, young, about under 30 left-wingers are very left-wing on social issues. They're usually only center-left-ish on economic issues, but they're very, very left-wing on social issues. This means that political parties who want to appeal to young left-wing voters need to appeal to very left-wing young people. This causes them to shift to the left. Now, by shifting to the left, that means these parties, the NDP, the Liberals, are not appealing to older demographics as much. To a certain extent. The Liberals' strongest demographic is boomers, but boomers are contrasting what everyone stereotypes them as. The boomer generation in Canada is the most liberal generation to have ever existed. They are actually still the only age group that strongly supports the Liberals. In fact, now this includes a lot of Gen Xers into it, but the 55 and silent generation too, but the 55 plus demo nationally is only about 6.5 point conservative lead compared to a 9-point lead nationally. And if you isolate that down to just 65 plus, which is roughly 60 plus, or 60 to 80, that actually becomes a tie. Possibly a Liberal lead, depending on the poll. Still. But to get back to the main point here from the digression, the NDP and the Liberals, by trying to appeal more to young voters, this young left-wing vote, are losing middle-aged voters, specifically Gen Xers and to a lesser extent millennials. Nationally, this means that the 35 to 55-year-old demographic, which is the early millennials and basically the entirety of Gen X minus a few years, that has a 15-point conservative lead. This isn't a coincidence. And even in under 35 voters, we actually see a 12-point conservative lead because the late millennials are shifting very conservative in response to left-wing parties shifting very socially liberal. Now, that might seem strange because the conventional conception is that millennials are very left-wing, but they're really not. Not in the way you think they are. Now, a lot of millennials propagated or created the ideas that the young left-wingers espouse, but there is a trend, which I've talked about in previous videos, that as you age, you get more conservative. And this is a result of basically life hitting you in the face. You have to pay taxes, you have kids, you're buying a house, etc. You have a job. Millennials are starting to hit those life milestones, and that's going to shift them conservative. But then there's also the corollary to that is people want to hit those life milestones. People don't buy a house, people don't have kids, people don't get married, people don't get jobs for fun. Because, I'm so quirky, I got a job. No, people get a job, people buy a house, people get married because they want to. People want a job. No one wants to be an idle floating hand, no matter how much someone tries to sell themselves. No one wants to be a NEET. People want to be productive. People want to get married. People want to have a house. People want to have kids. Smart people can psyop themselves into thinking they don't want this, but then in their old age, once they pass the years that they can actually have kids or get married meaningfully, then they realize their regrets. Tragically. So the millennials are starting to hit these milestones, but more importantly than hitting these milestones, particularly in Canada, on housing, they're realizing they can't hit these milestones and they might never hit these milestones. And that's shifting them to the right. Not necessarily because housing is a right-coded issue, but because the left is so focused on talking about social issues. Because they're trying to appeal to young left-wingers who have a lot of voice and clout, that they are losing focus on these issues. And that's what's happening right now with young millennials. But it's even more specific than just as the left is trying to appeal to young people, they're losing the middle-aged people, which they are. But it's even more specific than that. I'm sure at this point, many of you have probably seen at least one ad or one decision from a trade union that is just completely bizarre. There was a couple recently about the Israeli-Palestine conflict where I think it was like QP Ontario was posting pro-Palestine messaging online. Which doesn't make any sense because QP is a labor union. It's not a political advocacy group. It's not It's not a pro-Palestinian group. It's a union that's supposed to represent school support staff. Why are they talking about social issues or wars in the Middle East? That's not their purpose. Their purpose is to represent their members to get them better wages and better working conditions. And it's moments like this where the union leadership, a core demographic of the NDP and to a lesser extent liberals, is shifting to the left in response to young people shifting to the left, or a large segment of young Zoomers being very left-wing. This particular thing where the unions are losing focus of their purpose in life is actually causing unionized labor to shift right dramatically. I don't have the data offhand here, but if you look in Pulse Abacus, a couple of these, the Conservatives are now leading in private sector unions. Private sector union voters are voting Conservative at basically the same rate, or possibly even more, than the national average. This has never happened before, for the most part. And this is largely because union leadership is divorcing itself from the needs of workers. And this union leadership is contingent with the NDP. It's contingent with the Liberals. They're basically one and the same. This is why we are seeing things like, again, small city Ontario, rural BC, coastal BC, northern Ontario, usually areas that are strong union places, suddenly and dramatically shifting against that. Same thing with Coquitlam area. Coquitlam? Pronunciation. This isn't a surprise. This is just basic action-reaction occurrences. And it's these additive causes that are putting the Conservatives in a position where they can win a majority without actually breaking through in the GTA, or at least meaningfully breaking through. Because the NDP vote, as a consequence of these two phenomenon, is getting exceptionally inefficient. As one illustration of this, the NDP and the Liberals are both losing about equal voters to the Conservatives in percentage terms. And the NDP is losing about as many voters to the Conservatives as the Liberals are losing to the NDP, which is causing the NDP to be about flat, vote share-wise. Great. But that doesn't tell you the whole story, because the NDP is gaining votes in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec. They are losing voters in Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland specifically, BC, and they're about treading water in Ontario, but in Ontario itself, they're losing voters in small cities, Northern Ontario, and they're gaining them in the GTA, in Ottawa. So the NDP vote is getting more and more inefficient because they are losing strong unionized areas, such as former industrial Ontario, such as the small cities, and they're gaining a smooth section across all cities of the young, under 30-ish demographic. And this collapse of NDP vote efficiency does two things. First off, it allows the Conservatives to go in and win Windsor-Tecumseh, possibly win London North Centre or London Fanshawe. It allows them to be competitive in Hamilton. It allows them to win coastal BC. It allows them to win in places like Timmins, James Bay. But the other factor is it destroys Liberal vote efficiency because the Liberals are losing voters to the NDP in these urban areas. You look at places like Halifax. Halifax West, while still safe for the Liberals, is becoming more in play, not necessarily because the Conservatives are doing much better here in this riding, which they are, but because the Liberals are losing a lot of ground to the NDP. It's creating a more perfect vote split. That's what's happening in places like Greater Vancouver in general. Vancouver Granville is a perfect example. It's a perfect vote split that the Conservatives are barely winning. Same thing happening in Waterloo Centre. Sorry, Kitchener Centre. Saanich Sitch. Wait, is that the name of the riding? Pardon me. Yeah, Saanich Gulf Islands, sorry. Saanich Sitch is the provincial riding. Saanich Gulf Islands. Same deal. We're having perfect splits on the left, causing Conservatives to be competitive or win these ridings. Because the vote efficiency is collapsing on the left. Okay, so where does the logical conclusion of this then, of this transition? Because we're in the beginning of it. As you might ascertain from the generation demographics now, timeframes. Again, I don't really like the 2000 or 1997 to 2012 group. I might do a video on generations later, but in the meantime, we're going to use that. So we use that, and we look at 18 voting age. Only about half of Zoomers can vote right now. That means half still can't vote, which means we should still expect this realignment to continue for another 7 years to 2030. And by 2030, we should be locked into a new paradigm for a little bit. Another reason very importantly, why we should expect right now for a new paradigm to be emerging, which it is the fact that not only are we seeing a generation turnover right now, we are seeing a generation cycle turnover right now. Now, for those of you familiar, there's plenty of these theories, but one I like the most right now is called Strauss-Howe generation theory. You can read the book if you want, or you can, I guess, go to Wikipedia and read the synopsis. The general gist of Strauss-Howe generation theory is, roughly speaking, there is a 4-generation cycle that occurs every 4 generations, and this causes a change in society. You might have heard the simplified version of weak times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. You might have heard that simplified version. That's a derivative of this. Not necessarily, strictly speaking, Strauss-Howe, but it's a similar concept to Strauss-Howe. And right now, as predicted by Strauss-Howe, we are in what they call the crisis generation currently. And by his theory, the millennial generation-ish should be the ones who go on and create the new good times, according to the Strauss-Howe theory. So we should expect right now, not only just because of the single generation turnover, but the cycle turnover, that something dramatic should happen in Canada. The political system, the political alignment should change. If you watched my previous video on coups, revolutions, and civil wars, you will recall that I said in democracies, you see a thing called a democratic revolution. And a democratic revolution is kind of is a logical consequence of the Strauss-Howe generation theory turnover cycle, but applied to a democracy and other things. You watch the whole video if you want to watch and learn about it. But the gist of that video is about every 80 to 90 years in a democracy, you see the default party who runs the country switch. So right now, the last 90 years, it's been the Liberals. They've won about 2/3 to about 70% of the time since about 1930s. And as we go forward, assuming theory is correct, we should expect, it seems, the Conservatives to take over and become the default party for the next 80 to 90 years, depending on how the generations work out. There's lots of tailwinds going into this alignment, and these alignments are affecting the election. It's really no coincidence that the Conservatives had to kick out someone like O'Toole and replace him with someone like Poilievre for this to start materializing. The reason being is O'Toole did not run differently from the Liberals. He ran as a right Liberal in a campaign, but the era of liberalism in Canada is the era of the Liberals winning. They're the Liberal Party in their name, for crying out loud. You should expect voters to prefer the quote-unquote true brand to the quote-unquote knockoff. That's one of the reasons why he was basically always going to lose with the campaign he ran. At least with hindsight. And it's also why, if you look at the polling, as soon as Poilievre was elected leader of the Conservative Party last year, he gained 5 points, 3 to 4 points overnight, immediately, upon becoming leader. The Conservatives did. Going from like 32 to 36 immediately, instantaneously on him becoming leader. And since then, he's clawed out 3 more points in my model, or if you look at the polling average, he's clawed out 4 more points. Okay. Not bad. So where does this go? Well, we should expect this to continue going forward. And if you see or have looked at my previous videos, you might have heard me mention quote-unquote national conservatism. Now, this is an ambiguous term, as people use it for lots of different things. But the general gist of how I use it is it's a conservatism that's not particularly fussed on economics. It's just trying to pick the economics that achieve its goals, and its goals are family-orientated, and it's more socially conservative. Now, Poilievre is not socially conservative. Do not get me wrong there. But he's already adopting economic policies from a national conservative viewpoint. He's picking economics to satisfy the average family. That's the idea behind his housing changes, by his addiction changes, by his proposal of bail, or his desire for bail reform. A lot of these underpin that central motivation. And we should also expect in this cycle, if this is what is happening, and I am correct, that the first leaders of the Conservative Party going into this cycle should be more moderate on social policy, at least nationally speaking. And we should really expect to see the more socially conservative leaders pop up in 20 to 30 years as this cycle starts getting thoroughly underway. It's one of the reasons why I have said before, and I will say again, and I will continue standing by this, that I suspect Quebec specifically is going to be the first province to heavily curtail or restrict abortion. Because they're undergoing a similar cycle that's concluding about right now as well, and the logical consequence of the likely next outcome of this cycle, a very, very, basically the Nationalists won the last cycle, the result of it, and they're going to have, likely, Quebec is going to be gripped by some form of nationalist or separatist party for the rest of the century. And this will likely end up with them having to curtail abortion because their fertility rates are falling. And a nationalist that has no people of their nation doesn't exist. That will be the first shot across the bow of the last cycle's liberalism, which will likely recede from there. Could be wrong. I'm predicting the future. It's not a very easy task. If in 30 years I am completely wrong, I mean, I'm going to probably still be doing this or something related. So, I mean, you could just hit me up and be like, you're wrong. And it's like, oh, well, shoot. But in this particular instance, in this particular moment, right now, looking at 2025, we should expect the Conservatives to keep gaining ground because the Liberals and the NDP are incapable of answering this question right now. And the question is, how does the average family make out? They can't answer that question because they're the ones in charge. They're the ones who've done this to the average family. There's nowhere for them to go. So you see them descend further and further into attack ads, into slander, into identity politics, into social issues first, because they can't fix the rest of the problems. They caused those problems with the logical consequence of their chasing the youth, the left-wing youth, who has moved more and more and more left-wing. Now, I should note, just before I wrap this up here, just one last final point. I've talked a lot about the left-wing youth, but that should not be confused with the youth is left-wing. Now, the best numbers we have for under 25s, which is Zoomers, is it's pretty split. It's not clear which orientation this demographic is unless you compare it to previous demographics, in which case it's actually more conservative than millennials were at this point in time. But it's also more left-wing than millennials were at this point in time. There seems to be a trend, at least in the last couple generations, possibly exacerbated by the internet, where there's no center. And the left and the right is polarizing more and more and more. So while the left-wing youth, left-wing Zoomers are very socially liberal, the right-wing conservatives are becoming very socially conservative, which is, again, another reason why I suspect we will need to see 20 or 30 years before we start seeing real social conservative action in Canada. Because these young voters, these young conservatives, need to take power first. And it generally requires people to be in their 40s-ish before they can really become significant power brokers. Maybe late 30s if you are very skilled. That is where the trajectory seems to be. And it will cause a very interesting little window in the short term, as the youth become very polarized on social issues. Though the advantage right-wing youth currently have is that they're men. And the left-wing youth are mostly women. Why is that an advantage? Well, this is not all people, obviously. This is not all guaranteed. But generally speaking, if two people marry, the wife is more likely to assimilate to the husband's beliefs than the other way around. Now, some marriages, the two disagree on lots of issues. Great, that's fine. On some, they don't change, they don't merge, but usually they assimilate. And if they're going to assimilate to one view, it's usually the wife to the husband. There's statistics in churches, which is a good surrogate for this because religion and ideology are very similar. But if a father is religious, 94% of the time his whole family becomes that denomination. So if he's Catholic, his whole family will become Catholic. If he's Sunni, his whole family becomes Sunni. If he's Buddhist, his whole family will become Buddhist. Only 15% of the time, if the mother is a very devout religious person, so a very Catholic or very Buddhist or very Sunni again, does the whole family follow her. So more often, the wife assimilates to the husband than the husband assimilates to the wife's beliefs. And since young men are overwhelmingly right-wing, I mean, men in general are overwhelmingly right-wing. Right now we have, nationally, the Conservatives have a 20-point lead among men. 20 points. They only have a 1-point or 2-point lead among women. Now, I think the logical conclusion of this is that, yes, there will be a lot of the women who do get married will assimilate towards their husbands, but there's probably going to be a lot fewer marriages. A lot fewer kids, because there's such irreconcilable differences in the youth. But that's still not particularly good for the left in the short term. In the long term, they will have another cycle in probably 2100 or something like that. They'll probably be, the left wing will probably have a new edge and will be winning or something. But that happens every 100 years or so. It's just a cycle. Society is cycles. History are cycles. Though the end of the next cycle is going to be particularly interesting because that will be the 250-year cycle, which is another interesting cycle. But that is out of the scope of this video, so I will wrap this up here. So if you liked this video, if you liked this kind of analytics and discussion of Canada's politics, by all means, comment below. Let me know what you liked about it, what you don't like about it, and make sure you like, share, subscribe, and comment below. But with that, I bid you all adieu, and I will see you next week.